to the Pulse podcast by the Power Broker Media Group. I am your host, Adrienne Reddick. Before we get started, please subscribe, like, and share this video. Today we pause to remember Reverend Jesse Jackson, not just for what he did publicly, but for who he was to those who knew him personally. His voice, his courage, and his presence left a lasting impact, and today we honor the memories and moments that continue to inspire us. I have with me today Reverend Wayne G. Thompson, pastor of First Baptist Institutional Church, and Mrs. Kamara Garrett-Cooper, who is the daughter of Reverend Wilkins Garrett, former pastor of Mount Zion Progressive Missionary Baptist Church. Thank you both for joining me today.
Good to be here.
Thank you, Adrienne.
So, Reverend Thompson, I'd like to begin with you. Can you please share with our audience how you came to know Reverend Jackson, and when you think of him, what memory comes to mind?
Well, let me begin by saying I kind of knew him from the distance at first. There's about 9 years between our ages. By the time I got to college, he was already working with Dr. King. And in my freshman year, I was working with SCLC downtown on Hunter Street then, now Martin Luther King. And, of course, being young and being influenced by all of the stuff that was going on in the era, I wanted to be involved. And, of course, seeing him and knowing that young people were joining in with that process was also encouraging. It would be later that I'd actually get to see him up close. And that was on several occasions after I had begun ministry and going different places and being with him. But to be able to know him up close was after Kamara's dad came to town in 1977, I think it was, somewhere in there. I had been serving with Dr. McCree as well, helping him out and doing those things at Mount Zion. They wouldn't call, my pastor told them, don't call me because I wasn't married. So Garrett was a shoe-in over there. And my pastor let me know that the young man had a family. And so that was good. But Garrett came down and introduced himself to me at the city hall where I was working, and we became fast friends, and I had a new family. But anyway, we began our fast fellowship. Shortly after that, I linked him in with Dr. Henry Lyons, who was there, and we began to do things together ministerially, working with the convention, seeing that Dr. Lyons being elected, all those things were just fun things for us to be involved in. That whole process was, and of course, sharing as we did on every Sunday night. But then once Dr. Lyons began to rise and become elected later, and we go into the 80s, we knew then we had to join in when they helped Jesse. It was Kamara's aunt, it was his aunt, Aunt Mary, who came to visit often here. And, of course, she adopted me officially in the family as well. And she had a picture that she shared when Garrett was really young. He was a little baby there, and Jesse Jackson was holding him in the choir stand. He said, I can get Jesse. He had the contacts, all that stuff. So we were able to bring him here both in 84 and in 88. And we had such fun because, of course, he knew Dr. Lyons and to know Garrett and stuff like that. I was just a tag along at that point. But we had fun together. We talked about the movement, talked about what was going on and that kind of thing. And I reminded him that I had actually been there while we were not together. He was with Dr. King. I was with some students. We had been together, the mayor of Atlanta chartered a plane, and some of us who worked with the program went down there to Memphis to help march and stuff. I could walk then real good. And so we saw that. We were on the plane coming back by the time we learned that Dr. King had been assassinated. So we didn't get to be a part of that aftermath there. But we remember that time, and Jesse was talking about the fact that Atlanta didn't burn. Well, I tried to lead the people to burn. I mean, actually, we met on the corner of Chestnut and Fair Street, and I had a big afro then, a real pretty afro. My goodness, it was so pretty. And I was just radical and rallying the students. And a guy named Sanford Bishop, who was president of the SGA, who later went on to be in the Georgia House of Representatives, and he just retired from that after many years. But I led about 150 students down the hill, through the bottom, up the hill, past the bird cage, going the North Side Drive on our way downtown, saying we're going to burn this mother down and all that kind of stuff. So we were on the way. I tell my church oftentimes that when we got to the top of the hill, there was some men sitting there, and they said, "Where y'all going?" We said, "We're going to burn down this city," and all like that. And so another man said, while he was passing the wine bottle, said, "Ain't y'all them children from down that school down there? Y'all going down there downtown to burn, so y'all need to go back and learn some more, and don't go down there tearing up the town." So that ended my march to go burn the city. But all other cities, New York, Miami, Chicago, everybody else was burning. But that's the reason that Atlanta didn't burn down. They had students for Clark and Morehouse and Spelman. We all going down there. So that's the reason it didn't burn down. But I told Jesse that. He said, "Wayne," he said, "I heard you had a little temper on you." I said, "Well, not a temper." I said, "I just want to get the job done, to get the job done." So we laughed about that as well. Later, when I went to New York for the funeral of Dr. Sam Proctor, who was pastor at Abyssinia then, who had been pastor at Abyssinia. Dr. Calvin Butts, who's also a classmate of mine at Morehouse, had later become his executive assistant and pastor. And I had not seen Butts in several years, and announced that I was there. And he called my name. I had an Atlanta name. I can't call it now. The Lord won't let me do it. But he said, let him up. So the lady said, "He must really know you." He said, "Because nobody's been able to go up there all day." She said, I want to know who you are." So I said, "Well, I'm his classmate." Went up there, and that's the first time I laid flesh to flesh, with Jesse there in the room up there in his office, and on the second time rather. And he said, "I remember him. That's the mayor from Florida." And I said, "I'm not the mayor. I'm just a preacher, poor preacher from the South." And so we laughed that off and everything. But Butts was in there, Reverend Al was in there, and some other pastors from the city were there as well. So to know that and to know that they were involved and also there to be a part of that service that day was a good time for us to get together. Later on, we would share a few minutes as I was leaving town later that day.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you for that background. So, Kamara, I understand that you're, based on, of course, what Reverend Thompson is saying that, Reverend Garrett and Reverend Jackson were close. And so can you share how that relationship came to be?
Sure. So both Reverend Jackson and my father are from Greenville, South Carolina. They attended the Springfield Baptist Church together because their mothers attended the Springfield Baptist Church. And my father, his biological father, died when he was 18 months old, leaving my grandmother a widow. And then Reverend Jackson was also raised by a single mom. And both of them were best friends. And they sang in the choir together at Springfield Baptist. And since Jesse is about 9 years older, as Reverend Thompson said, than both he and my dad, he would watch my dad on the front pew when they had to sing in the choir to make sure that my dad was doing what he needed to do. And if he had to go to the bathroom, Jesse was the one that took him to the bathroom and everything like that. And so, just being 9 years older, Jesse actually ended up being kind of like a mentor to my dad. My dad looked up to Jesse Jackson. And when Jesse graduated high school, he graduated Sterling, which was the all black high school in Greenville, South Carolina, and went on to college in Illinois. About the same time, my grandmother remarried. And so my father's stepfather and mother moved him to Houghton, New York. And at that time, they kind of lost, touch with one another. But from Houghton, my dad graduated from high school and ended up going to Indiana University. Well, by that time,
Hmm.
Jesse had finished school. He had actually transferred to North Carolina A&T and then moved back to Chicago. And so, I'm sure one of those summers or something when they both were home with their moms or whatever, they were able to reconnect. And because Chicago's not that far from IU, they
Yeah.
even were able to, talk then. This story goes that my mom ended up leaving IU and going home to Gary, Indiana, and my dad wanted to propose. And so Jesse was the one that got my dad and took him down to Gary so he could propose, to so there's just a lot of history between the two of them. Just being from the same, at the time, Greenville was a small town. So being from the same small town and having mothers that close together.
Yeah. We all connected by the church, huh? And
Yeah.
in the small towns.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So, Reverend Thompson, what lessons did he teach you simply by how he lived?
Well, first of all, for me to see that he went a different route, as a young preacher, um, he was not going to become a conventional pastor of a church, and so that was an intrigue for me because I've been dealing with uh, the call to ministry and resisting it because I didn't never want to pastor. That was not going to be my bailiwick, and I was going to Atlanta to major in business and all that, and I was going to be a businessman with plenty of money and not be a pope preacher. And so Jesse, on the other hand, began to take the movement and personalize it. Now, after the death of Dr. King, uh, the original dream got divided between several leaders. I mean, there were others who were at the table. And so the move for integration and equality was still on the table. But Jesse wanted to focus on the access to this. What would it bring people? Not just the ability to go sit down at a lunch counter and to be able to go in these department stores, but what could the community take away from it so that it could be economically advantageous? And that was intriguing as well because he went after corporations, he went after huge businesses and the government to release more dollars into the African American community. And it was he who stopped them from calling us, Negroes and colored and other names and say we are African American. And that was also done because he had done research on his own ethnicity, where he came from and had that background and found the connection all the way back to Africa. So um, that stayed with me. It stayed with a lot of us who were listening and want to become involved in the movement that and especially my friends who were going to ministry and they're telling me to come with them. I said, no, that's not gonna be my life. I'm not gonna join y'all. I'll send y'all some money. But to know that he stayed with it and that he was gaining traction. Um, the first time he ran, he didn't get but 1 million votes. The second time he ran, it was very serious. He got over 7 million votes 4 years later. And so that was the whole piece together. Always intrigued me because he kept focused and he was always finding new ways and avenues to broker, make deals to make things better for Black people in America. So I was always encouraged and impressed by that. even though I didn't want to join him and others in the ministry. I wanted to do something else. But God had his way in that as well. So I learned not to fight with God about it. Just go ahead and do what he say do and get involved.
I
Yeah.
hear
And then,
you.
another thing is I was listening today. Um, there's a Reverend Hall up in Philadelphia, Kamara, that your dad knew and used to go preach for.
James Hall.
Yeah, James Hall, Dr. James Hall. He was
Hmm.
there and in South Carolina today. I looked at that service there today. He is 90 something years old, and
Wow.
he had baptized Jesse. He had baptized
Mm.
Jesse, and so that was moving to me to know that because I met Hall again. I go to preach in Philadelphia for Dr. William Moore at the 12th Street Baptist Church, and when Dr. Hall learned that I was from St. Petersburg, he actually remembered Garrett and wanted to know that I know him. I said, "Man, that's my friend," and blah blah blah. So that opened up yet another caveat for us to know each other beyond that time. So he was there to do that. That was a moving service, by the way. I don't want to get ahead of myself there, but that was a moving service in tribute to him because um, uh, he came and talked about having baptized him, and that meant that they had been together on some other things as well.
That is moving. The fact that he had baptized him
Yeah.
and then come to be at his service. So, Kamara, tell us how Reverend Jackson and how did he support your dad behind the scenes when cameras weren't present?
Um, like I said, Jesse kind of served as a mentor to Daddy, and um, I mean, there's so much that I think that wasn't unique for my father, that it's very similar to everyone who has watched Jesse on television or has heard one of his speeches or what have you. My dad, he was a pastor, but before he was a pastor, he just like Daddy Wayne said about, being power to the people and,
Yeah.
just making sure that our people are represented well, that we have what we need. That it was the 60s. It was a time, and the 70s. It was a time for standing up and saying, Black power. And so my father already was in that vein. So yes, Jesse definitely influenced him in that. And I can't say for sure if that even happened while they still were living in South Carolina together, because I don't know that story.
Yeah.
But I do know that at IU, I remember my mother talking about um, my father and his two best friends, um, my Uncle Leighton and my Uncle VD, all were like power to the people and, doing marches and, doing sit-ins and doing all that even at IU. So it's in him to do that. So I think similarity of spirit is a big influence. And that's really with everybody who my father hung out with Pastor Thompson, with Reverend Lyons, with all the people that he hung out with, had that similarity of spirit that really wanted what was better for Black people. So you had things to happen like, when we had the IMA Federal Credit Union, because there was no Black banks in our city, and so we wanted to be able to loan for houses or for cars or for whatever we needed to do. You had that through Mount Zion Human Services that was helping Black people to own their own homes and help them with businesses. So you just had that period, and again I think that his influence of just being a Black man not afraid to speak out for his people, a Black man who did not bite his tongue about demanding better for his people, whether that was going in front of a president, whether that was going in front of any other political leader. whether that was marching, whatever it was that he had to do, he was going to do. And so I think that the times of the 60s and 70s influenced Daddy to be the way he was.
My question to you was going to be, can you share a moment when Reverend Jackson encouraged or challenged you to step into your purpose?
Yeah, you know, you make me tell some other stories there because my going to Chicago, uh, I got to go to Chicago because there's a guy named Robert DeLeon who was a year ahead of me at Morehouse, and he was going to leave school because he got a job early to go to work at Ebony's there on Jet Magazine. And so that summer, he told me, he said, Wayne, he said, you need to come on and let me get you a job. Well, I needed a job because my mother was sick. I said, I'm going to go up there, but I want to work for the summer. I don't want to stay up there and everything like that. He said, well, just come on up there. We'll see what happens and everything. By me being there, of course, I got to talk with Jesse, a couple of times and that stuff like that, which was also good. Because then he said, you need to get involved with this. I said, but I'm not going to be here. Atlanta. I'm going back to Atlanta because I got to be able to go home. My mother was sick and everything like that. So, but here's the point. He said, we need some more young men like you to join in with us. I need you to work with me on this thing. I said, I don't want to preach. I don't want to do none of that. I'm going back to Morehouse. I'm going back home and do my thing. And so that was it.
I have one last question for both of you then. What do you hope people remember most about who he was at his core?
I'll go first. I think that you hear a lot of negative things about Reverend Jackson. And I think you'll hear negative about anybody. But I want people to understand that he literally dedicated his entire life to uplifting the Black community. And that is something to be said. When you have dedicated your life to service,
Yeah.
um, pastors do it, um, political leaders do it. But I mean, the whole purpose and why it's so similar, even though we know that there's a separation of church and state and all that kind of stuff, but really what a pastor is doing is he is being a servant leader, and he is saying that what I'm going to dedicate my life to is the telling of the gospel and making sure that people hear it and making sure that souls are saved. So it's still a heart to serve others. It's a heart to want people to do better. Well, that's, Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson was a pastor and a political leader, and he spent his entire life trying to make sure that people were better off than where he found them. And so, whether that be the hostages that he freed, whether that be the sermons that he preached, whether that be the movement period that he did to make sure that Black people did not feel like less than, that they didn't feel like second class citizens, that they truly understood that they were royal and they knew their worth. That's what I want people to understand. Not everybody does that. Most of us don't.
Right.
So the fact that he dedicated his life, whether good or bad, he's a man just like any other man, and men
Yep.
have flaws, but he still dedicated his life to making sure that the people did better.
Okay.
That's really great. And I want to say this right here. I want us to remember, um, besides being a great person, a great preacher, a great pastor, he was a darn good fighter.
Mm,
I mentioned earlier about how the emphasis of Dr. King's movement shifted upon his assassination, and that everybody was brokering for different parts of the pie in order to be the voice to replace him. I think that Jesse became more of the voice, the fighter for the cause, rather than other leaders. Everywhere I get a chance to talk about that, Jesse Jackson stayed out there. He wanted them to vote. He wanted them to stay active. He wanted them to improve themselves, ourselves, and all of that. Regardless of what they say about him, he was a stellar American. He was a soldier. He did all the things the right way. I was the radical. I wasn't going to do nothing. I wasn't going to do none of that stuff. Never was interested in that stuff. But he did it. And he took the stripes with it. And he still raised his family and he did all that. So that's commendable. But if we take nothing else away from that, the economic struggle, the voting, the right to vote mattered. And then for us to have access to services that we deserve, that our ancestors bled and died for, that we still have them. I was talking to somebody the other day about how Jesse's going to be missed because of where he came, or what he did while he was on the main platform. If I had nothing else to say, I'd want to say that we got to remember that we got to vote, because if we don't vote, and it's coming up now with this thing with what we got going on now, it's extremely, extremely critical that we must see that every age group gets registered. They're trying to play games with that. Got to have extra ID. You got to be able to prove you from this country. I'm so sick of it because it enrages me.
Yeah, it does.
That after all of this time, that we got to go back now and prove that we are who we say we are. And they're trying to take our history and take it out of the libraries, take it out of the schools, and take it out of everything like that. But I say to people every chance I get, everywhere I go several places across the country, don't be at ease in Zion. It's not a time to rest.
Correct.
It's not a time to relax. It's a time to react, a time to revive this fight and keep the fight going, and realize that there is an enemy out there. And Jesse Jackson fought to his last opportunity. They tried to get him to stay home from Minnesota when they killed the black man up there, but he was there. Couldn't talk good, but he was there. He kept him always where he needed to be. So I want us to remind ourselves that he never took a break from the struggle. He always kept fighting. And so as long as I'm living, and I'm getting up the road too, I'm going to keep on fighting and fussing until black people understand that it's in our hands. It's got to be in our hearts. It's got to make certain that it's begins in our homes. We got to make sure our children and our grandchildren realize that the way to come through this America is America. And then the other thing I want to remind us is that Jesse Jackson made that part of his platform. That Rainbow Coalition, aside Operation Push, was about all the people, red, yellow, black, and white, coming together. He actually brought the forefront for Obama to have a platform, because the Rainbow Coalition was so diverse. See, diversity, he understood it way back then, that diversity was going to be our key. And while we out here picking at one another because you light skinned, I'm black, and all that kind of stuff, that's a part of our DNA. But it makes us ought to want to connect to one another, because our connecting to each other, not fighting each other, not killing each other, is the thing that's going to help us to survive. And so if I get that in there to say that the Rainbow Coalition has to continue to survive and stay on the scene, because we know that that's what's going on. We know that racism is still alive.
Yep.
And we saw racism raise its ugly head by not letting Jesse Jackson go up there in the Capitol up there in D.C.
Yes.
He going to D.C., but he going to Howard University. That's a great atrocity in my estimable opinion, and I could say some more words about it, but it's just a great atrocity,
Yeah.
and it's a sign that they don't have any, they don't care about us. Now, the man said, Mr. Johnson in the House of Representatives,
Yes.
the major speaker, he said it's an issue of precedent, but he lied
Of course.
because they let Rosa Parks go in there.
Yep. Yep.
She did a good job.
Exactly.
She gave up a seat, but the idea is that she went in. Jesse should have been in there. He should have been able to go up there,
yes. Of course.
and he shouldn't have had the last word on that. But I still contend that we got to stay in the fight. We got to stay in the
That's
struggle
right.
and realize I don't care if you drive a good car, got a good house. If some brothers and sisters and don't have what you have, never been what you had, and realize that you owe society, you owe yourself, you owe the system to stay in the struggle and uphold black people's name. Jesse Jackson will always be remembered, and we gotta fight now. His voice is stilled in silence, but our voices together, right on this platform right here, our voices together can strike a match, strike a light, and then still live, and we can realize that God is going to be at the head of this thing. Got to put God in. Jesse kept his mind on God, everything he did.
Yeah.
Jesse did what he did. I do what I do. You do what you do, and keep the dream alive.
Amen.
I am somebody. I'm going to be better.
I am somebody.
I'm going to do what I got to do. So long live Jesse, and may he save from eternity's stalwart bridge. We are somebody.
That's right. That's
Amen.
right. So as we wrap up, I want to just say thank you for sharing your stories and memories of Reverend Jackson. His impact will live on in the conversations we keep having and the work we continue to do. Thank y'all so much.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.